Hello, this is Glenn Pendlay with the Weightlifting Scoop podcast, and I have Don McCauley and Rudy Nielsen both here with me for this episode. And I want to talk about one thing today I think is important, especially with a number of new people entering the sport of weightlifting. Talk about how important certain things are for beginners. And I'm not talking about, a topic that we discussed previously, the important things in training, that sort of thing. I want to talk about competing. How important, Rudy, do you think it is for a beginner to get into a competition fairly early in their career?
Are we talking weightlifter or?
Yeah, I'm talking a weightlifter or, even a CrossFitter that just wants to do well in weightlifting, wants to improve as a lifter.
Well, obviously you know this. As far as weightlifting goes, walking out on the platform is a completely different experience than in the gym. Excuse me. We just had 16 of our athletes from our gym compete at an affiliate. We talked about this today, at an affiliate challenge in Maryland. And 7 out of 7 of my girls PR'd, and, most of my guys PR'd. There was a clean and jerk ladder. And those competition experiences obviously take you somewhere where you've never been before. I think as far as weightlifting goes, that's a little bit more nerve-wracking than it is. You kind of have the ability to, at a CrossFit competition, to, especially on a heavy lift, kind of just let go and not be afraid like you normally would be in the gym.
Well, sorry to interrupt you here, but in most CrossFit competitions, do you not have an attempt to do a lift over if you miss it the first time?
Yeah, I think we talked about this last time, but that's the cool part of the ladders and the 10 minutes to establish or whatever is there's as many attempts as you want. Yeah,
so no attempt is okay. You get one chance at this weight, and
right.
If you miss it, it's done. So.
Yeah, and then with weightlifting, that's a completely different animal. I mean, you might just have a bad day, or you might have a bad lift, or you might get forward, on your jerk or something like that, and
then it's over.
Yeah, it's over. So I think for both sports, it's incredibly important. For CrossFit, the tendency is to obviously to push harder when you're in a competition. You're going to experience, the first time you compete, you're going to experience a level of soreness that you've never felt in your life. You're going to experience a level of fatigue that you've never felt. You're going to have to come back through multiple workouts. And then for weightlifting, it's all about, controlling the heart rate before you walk out there, controlling the nerves, and then being able to be as precise as you are in the gym with near maximal load. So, we encourage, I want my guys to compete as much as possible, especially when they're first starting out. I'm sure you do too.
Absolutely.
There's no way around that. There's no way you can simulate that in the gym. So, it becomes massively important on both sides.
Don, from a more of a purely weightlifting, perspective, do you agree with me or disagree that getting in your first meet fairly quickly is one of the most important things you can do to keep yourself progressing quickly as a beginner?
Oh, yeah. No, I agree with you completely on that. Generally, the way I've handled athletes in the past is as soon as I tell them this beforehand, as soon as I think you're technically safe enough to go out on a platform, I want you in a meet. And new people, I want them in probably, if I can do it, a meet a month. They've got to get used to that, just what you guys were just talking about. Weightlifting is an up and down sport with the pulse rate and getting out on a platform all alone. You've got so many attempts, and that's it. And you've got to be correct. So, yeah.
And you can learn some of that in the gym with training, certainly. But a competition is a different animal. And, I think, personally, that one of the most productive days in a weightlifter's career is that first meet. Because you see a lot of times where, they figure out what their weaknesses, they figure out what their flaws are. And a lot of times, first or second meet, somewhere in their first, 6 months of training, they'll have some kind of a plateau or a mental, like a mental block about a certain weight. They get in competition and get their adrenaline going, and they bust through that. And I just think it's super important.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You'll always find that the guys, and I think we all have them once in a while, is there are guys that train in the gym and they just never seem to be ready for competition, and by God, they aren't. They've got to get out there.
Rudy, as far as, and I'm going to just imagine this since I'm not a CrossFit coach, but just, from an outsider's perspective, I probably think in a lot of ways, just like a weightlifter, a lot of times can learn to kick it up just to another gear that they didn't know they had when they get in competition. The fear goes away of going under the bar because of, adrenaline. But I'm going to imagine that in CrossFit, a lot of times people will find that they have another gear once they get in front of a crowd, and the amount of fatigue or the amount of discomfort that they think they can't push through, that you get a crowd screaming at you and you find out you can go. You can, find that higher gear.
Yeah, we the beauty of CrossFit competition, like I said, is there's always that you push harder than you ever thought you would push before, and you wind up the Monday after the competition barely being able to walk, and the workouts didn't maybe look that hard, but they were. And I think that's incredibly valuable for competitors in our sport, where there's only a certain push you can have in the gym. There's only a certain level of intensity that you can have there. There'll be times it'll be a little bit higher than it won't, but a guy that comes to mind is Matt Hathcock. He's been in fourth place in the Southwest region twice now, and he came out and won the Outlaw Open. And the guys from his gym were all telling me he's got this like thing that he does when he goes into competition where he'll have completely normal numbers. Everybody in the gym will be close to him or beat him on workouts, and he goes out to a competition and crushes everybody. And he's kind of got that killer, I mean, not to be cheesy, but he's got that killer instinct where he can just take things, he can take more pain, and he can just recover better than anybody else in those settings. And that's a lot for us. That's a lot. Like, we have guys that they're not the best on the first workout at a competition, but by number 5 or 6, everybody else looks like they're gonna die, and they just keep going at the same pace they've been going the entire time. And that's when you find your guy that is going to be there every year in every event, every competition. He's going to be top. He's going to be on the podium or close to it. And there's guys like that in our sport are pretty special. A guy like Froning or somebody like that who workout after workout, just it's the same pace, it's the same thing no matter what, no matter how many workouts he's been through. And you learn a lot about yourself when you're on that stage, and you can't run away. You can't quit because there's 300 or 400 people watching you, and it's kind of beautiful to see what comes out on the other side of that.
Well, I think we all kind of agree that whether you're a CrossFitter or talking about weightlifting from a CrossFit perspective or just from a purely weightlifting perspective, getting in competition is important, as I think it is in all sports. But I think particular interest for us. For maybe a couple of different reasons between, a CrossFitter who lifts or a pure weightlifter, it's important to compete. If you're somebody that is scared to compete and keeps putting off competing until you're quote unquote good enough, that's not good for your development and your progress. To
add to that, and this is the thought that sort of popped into my head, the carrot is very important. For either sport, for almost any sport, that competition date looming out in front of you is going to make you train harder.
Oh, sure.
So you may have decent numbers in the gym as a lifter. You may have decent, your conditioning might be okay, stuff like that. But there is no doubt that from a simple adherence standpoint, the more looming the date is, the more you're going to push, the more time you're going to spend in the gym, the more dedicated you're going to be. And that's something that's always been, are known as in our area as the competition gym, quote unquote. And that's because we want our people to have that motivation. We want them to no matter what, they're going to come in because they don't want to look stupid. when they go do that competition.
I think that's absolutely the same as in weightlifting. I mean, the last 8-12 weeks before a big competition, people normally gear up their training. They push a little harder, things like that. And that's really pretty normal to see in a weightlifting gym.
When do you see
everything steps up a little bit when the competition gets close?
Do you guys generally see some fairly big PRs that week before or 10 days out? Or
Well, not so much, because we're, 2 weeks before we start to taper the volume a little bit, and then the intensity, comes a little bit down the last week. So we're, not usually seeing huge PRs the last 2 weeks. But, I would say if there was a time in training, when you see the most PRs, it would be the last, 4 weeks or something in training, because, before we start to taper down a little bit. But more than just PRs, I mean, you see people going harder, going after their doubles and going after, their squats and this and that. I think that provides a nice little training cycle atmosphere. When a meet's 16 weeks out, you're probably not pushing your maxes quite as much.
Yeah.
You're probably, not pushing the envelope, and that's needed in weightlifting. Times that you're not quite going as hard at it, and in times when you're really, really pushing, you can't go without having some cyclical nature to training, and that provides a nice one. But I want to switch gears a little bit to more of a pure weightlifting topic now, and this has to do with learning the lifts. And I see a lot of people, and I'm speaking to people that are either just starting weightlifting or thinking about doing weightlifting. I have read time and again on forums or this or that, people, I'd love to do weightlifting, but I'm going to wait until I get my squat to 400. Or I would love to do weightlifting, but I'm going to wait till I get a little stronger so I don't embarrass myself. And I often, I'll hear people and they'll comment on our lifters and say, man, I wish I could do that. I'd love to do that. I'm like, why don't you? I mean, give it a shot, try to do some snatches. I'll be happy to look at a video or whatever to encourage them to start. Oh, I'm not strong enough. Maybe I'll try it once my squat gets to, XYZ number. And I think that is just one of the most, sad things I hear, because I just think, the sooner you start, the sooner you're going to be good. I almost think sometimes, I'll tell you this, it's much harder to teach somebody technique once they're already strong than to teach them technique when they're weak.
Trust me. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I got plenty of guys that have 270-pound snatches that throw the bar over their head 9 out of 10 lifts.
Yeah. It's tough to teach somebody to be a good lifter when they've already have a 500-pound back squat. If you can get them when their back squat's still 300, it's a hell of a lot easier to teach them how to lift. And in a year's time or 2 years' time, they're going to be far ahead of the guy that waited until they had a 400 or 500-pound squat before they started.
Especially not to derail you or interrupt you, but especially if that squat is hips back, bar low, whatever. Even if it's a high bar, if it's hips back, you're in trouble. If a guy walks in with a 500-pound squat and it's not, where it should be, that's useless.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the other things. If they don't know how to snatch, they don't know how to clean and jerk, it's very likely that something they're doing is, when they're training by themselves without any coaching input, it's very likely that something they're doing, whether it be how they're squatting, they're already tight in the shoulders and they're building up their bench and just decreasing their flexibility. There's something that they're doing that is probably actually going to be a hindrance to their weightlifting career once they do decide to start. Don, I am sure you have a story here or there about, somebody that walked in with a big back squat or big bench or something like that, and it caused you to probably rather them come in with, 200 pounds off their back squat and still able to move.
Absolutely. I'd rather take them and start them with a bar for all the lifts at the same time, including squat, including everything. Much easier to teach. These things, the Olympic lifts, they have to be accurate. You have to get the muscles doing the right things. You have to get the joints doing the right things. If they've overdeveloped themselves strength-wise too much, as you know, just like you guys just said, you got to battle that, and they don't want to do lifts with just the bar. They can't feel